let's go to our guest. We have a guest here who's a very, very special, highly respected man, and I want you to know that I am going to show the highest respect for him. He's the Imam Feisal Abdul Rauf. He's the author of books. He's the author of a book called What's Right with Islam. What's Right with Islam is What's Right with America. That's the exact title. I'm sorry I wasn't fluent with it, but that's the title. What's Right with Islam is What's Right with America. He is a moderate, well-respected, highly, highly venerated man, and I want to just ventilate some issues with him to see if we could have a better understanding of Islam in general, and I'm sure he could educate us on the subject. Here he is. How do you do, sir? I'm Jackie Mason. I'd like to talk to you. How do you do?
Thank you very much for having me on your show, Jackie. You're one of my icons and idols, and I have a very high regard for you. I have a number of your tapes from many, many years ago. I've listened to them with great joy and great interest.
Oh, this is very exciting. It's so exciting, I forgot what I wanted to ask you. My
ambition is to be an imam who's like you, who becomes a successful comedian. Because I'm sure if we succeed in doing that, we'll do a lot to turn around relationships between not only our faith communities, but also between, this great country and the 1.3 billion Muslims worldwide.
Well, thank you. I know you've handled a lot more well-steeped and informed people on the issue of Islam than me, and I know you're very well prepared to answer these questions, but the reason I'm going to ask you these questions is because I feel there's such huge amount of misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the whole idea of Islam and the whole religion. You hear such opposing points of view and opinions from so many different people. Some say, and I want you to answer this question because it would clear up the minds of a lot of American people who are totally confused on the subject, because there's extremes on both sides that we don't understand. For instance, some people tell me that in the Quran, and I've read this myself, I shouldn't say some people, I've read this myself in the Quran, where it says you should behead the infidel, that people who don't belong in your religion or people from other religions should either be beheaded, they should be skinned, they should be killed, tortured, murdered. All kinds of vicious things should happen to them if they're from other religions. And it says so in the Quran, and I have quotations here from the Quran. And when I meet a Muslim, I don't feel that he's my enemy. And I'm always shocked to hear that the Quran says this, because I find Muslims very intelligent, decent, legitimate people, just like you, who could be crazy about a Jew like me and my jokes. So I can't pretend you're out to kill Jews. But why does the Quran say this? And that's what confuses everybody.
Yes, well, you see, that one of the difficulties in interpretation of text, always, even in the Bible for that matter, is that there are certain verses which are revealed in certain contexts in certain times. And this is why, under Islamic law, the interpretation of text to arrive at a particular decision, which is deemed to be a legal decision, is not something which anybody can read and arrive at a decision. It's like when you go to a lawyer. I've had this case, I'm sure many of your people in the audience have had, where they read a statute, and just because you understand the English language, we think that we can understand how the court would interpret a particular thing. The same thing applies to verses of the Quran. Many of these verses were revealed in certain contexts where the Prophet and his followers were not allowed to practice their religion, like most prophets, including Jesus and Moses, who are highly regarded by Muslims. They were suppressed in those societies, not allowed to practice their faith. And permission was granted to the Muslims to fight those who fought them for that reason. However, other verses of the Quran also are very clear on saying that the moment they stop fighting, they sue for peace, then you should actually negotiate a peace treaty. And the vast history of Islam through the 14 centuries of history has proven that, except for certain moments in history, the predominant attitude of Muslims towards non-Muslims, especially to Jews and Christians, was one of friendship, was one of engagement, was one of Muslims are allowed to marry Jews and Christians. So the interpretation of militancy has, in the modern era, is really the result of politics and power politics and economics, and less about theology per se. But once that happens, you do have people who, because of those issues, will use theological arguments to arrive at their militancy. Just like the young man who killed Yitzhak Rabin.
Now, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm trying to understand if this is only a defensive kind of a measure, if and when they're attacked, then basically it's a defensive kind of conversation. Basically, you're saying we don't exonerate or excuse killing people just because they're from a different religion. It's only if they attack our religion or abuse our religion or our people, we have a right to defend ourselves by doing whatever is necessary to defend ourselves.
Right.
So if that's the case, then why is it that to this day, and I have to ask you this question because I say I have lists here of different schools in Washington, in New York, in New Jersey, where school kids are taught to hate Christians, to hate Jews, and I have quotations here about the text of these books that teach them all this. And these schools are not closed. I don't hear any outrage from the Muslim community about this, why it exists in the schools. And one after the other have all kinds of, I don't want to quote these things to you because I'm sure you know it yourself, but if I have to, I will. What's your opinion about why does it exist in the schools? Here, from the New York Times, they quote this in certain schools in Virginia, certain schools in New Jersey, certain schools in New York, where it says here, destroy the infidel, the Americans are worthless, Jews should be destroyed, different kinds of ways of saying it. And even in the mosques, it says, a recent study of the Freedom House found the parallel problems of venomous anti-Jewish and anti-Christian materials in the United States mosques. The most prominent American Muslim organizations, especially the Council of American Islamic Relations, spew anti-Semitism and even host a neo-Nazi. The same applies in Canada, it says here, where the head of the Canadian Islamic Congress, Mohammed al-Masri, publicly endorsed the murder of all Israelis over the age of 18. Now, this is a lot of accusations. I really hope you could answer this.
Well, first of all, Islamic law is very clear and very specific that all non-combatants and all innocent civilians must not be attacked, may not be harmed. This is very, very clear. And this is why, and I myself have been involved in trying to actively to shine the light on schools in this country that have tried to foment this kind of understanding. And I think there's a growing movement among the Muslim community to eliminate such teachings because they are false and they are also dangerous in terms of fomenting animosity between the faith traditions.
Well, how does it all creep into the texts of major schools these are not the schools that are created by the janitors of a building or by some lowlife who owns a gasoline station. This is the official schools or the major schools of the Islamic religious people.
Yes,
who created these schools.
Is that you see,
why would these schools tolerate it, and why would they still be in those schools after all these years? And why is it people like you, a man of peace and love and brotherhood and kindness and gentility towards all people, why is it that people like you have no influence enough to put a stop to all this kind of education of hate and viciousness and violence?
Well, part of the reason is because we don't have a church. We don't have a church-type organization in Islam, never did. And Muslims are very much feel independent. They have a direct relationship to God, to their Creator, with no intermediary. So this has allowed the possibilities of those who are well-funded or those who may be in the political, dominant group at any given point in time, to influence the opinions of many people. And over the last half a century, a number of things have happened in parts of the Muslim world. You've had the writings of certain militants like, Said Qutb, who came to America and felt that, religion was on the wane. And because he was attacked by the secular regimes of Abdul Nasser at the time, fomented a philosophy which was very militant against the West and against, not only the West, against all those who were against religion.
But how should how does a guy like me, excuse me, I hate to interrupt you, but how does a guy like me or every American, how do we know to what extent, what percentage of the Muslims agree with this kind of teaching they have in the schools of hate and violence towards all other religions? And how do we know what percentage of Muslims are on your side who feel that there should be peace and love and brotherhood? How does an innocent person, a bystander, how does he determine on which side most of the Muslims are on, if they see it in the major schools and they find it in the mosques?
Well, there's 1.3 billion Muslims worldwide. Right. And for every comment like this, there are comments by many scholars who have issued fatwas, who have said that
Yeah.
that countries like the United States or like France, because Muslims are allowed to practice their religion freely, even more freely than in their own countries of origin, have a higher rating in terms of being the Darul Islam, being a member
in other words,
state of the House of Islam, because we're allowed of freedoms and rights to practice our faith tradition.
in other words, you're saying these people are basically renegades and outcasts who are saying this because they don't represent the really true thinking of the Muslim teachings. Is that what you're saying?
They do not reflect
They not reflect the real
However,
teaching
let me say
of the
this,
Muslim
though.
religion. I'm sorry, we have to go to a break. I'm going to get right back to you. I'm not going to tie you down, and I'm not going to interrupt you. But unfortunately, we have to make a living here, so we go to a break now, and we'll be back in a moment. And just save your thought. We'll be glad to hear it.
We'll have